Welcome to another edition of Patriots No-Huddle, brought to you by PatsFans.com. Derek Haven, Steve Balsherry, Mike Diabate, your hosts as always. I want to start off the show by saying I hope everyone's having a great summer, safe, fun, and hopefully the 4th of July was great for everyone. As I always start the show, Steve, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. I get to talk football with you two guys, and it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. So, training camp is right around the corner. I think everybody's excited this year, even more so than normal. There's a lot of excitement in the air around Foxborough. What could be better than to sit here and talk about it with you guys?
Yeah, we are recording on right now. It is 11:09 Eastern on July 9th, and that we are 2 weeks away from training camp, Mike. And I'm sure you're excited to head down there. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, Derek. I'm also doing great, Steve. Hope you guys had a great fourth and everyone kind of coming back to some sense of reality, knowing that 2 weeks from today, the New England Patriots will be on the practice fields of Gillette Stadium in Foxborough, Massachusetts. And I, for one, cannot wait. I know you guys can't wait. I know our fans, our listeners, Patriots Nation cannot wait to see this team. A lot to be excited about, a lot of question marks, but the question marks, I think, are positive question marks this year, and that's something we haven't had here in New England for the last couple of years. So it'll be good to see what this team can do once it's presently constituted on the field. And Steve, we've both said several times, the pads really are where these practices begin. That's going to start to tell the tale when it comes to your 2025 New England Patriots.
Yeah, absolutely. And, today I figured, guys, with 2 weeks out, we're hoping to get a guest next week. I have one in mind, but we'll see if he can come through. If not, we also are just going to do a little training camp preview. So next week, guys, we'll be doing our normal show for those who are listening. And I want to thank those who are listening live and also those who are listening later, whether it's through Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or whether you are watching us through YouTube. Please do subscribe to those if you would. If you could like, share, leave us a review. It keeps us high in those rankings so other Patriots fans can find us. So today we're just going to kind of go around the horn, guys, and there's a lot to kind of discuss. Steve, I'll kick it over to you first. What do you have in mind to kind of throw out there for us to talk about today?
Well, this isn't a Patriots question per se, but it's an AFC East question. Look, the Miami Dolphins traded away Jonnu Smith, and they're bringing back Darren Waller, who's been retired, but said he would come out of retirement only for Miami. Now, he was a good tight end for many years. I'm curious of what you guys think. What kind of production you think he can bring back after being away for so long?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's kind of a question mark. He really dealt with injuries a lot before I know he had some, I don't know if it was a mental health stuff off the field as well, but I know he had some injuries on the field kind of at the tail end, struggled to stay healthy. I think stepping away sometimes is really good for players. And at the same time, you always wonder if they're able to kind of knock the rust off. That's always the big question mark. So, he's a question. Minkah Fitzpatrick also came back in that trade that you mentioned, but, to me, I am wondering, what his impact can be. I'm not really as worried about Miami's offense per se. From their perspective, I think they'll produce. I think their defense is really going to be the biggest question mark and where their projection is. And I don't think there's a seat hotter, Mike, and I want to get your take on this. I don't know if there's a seat hotter in the NFL going into the year than Mike McDaniel.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think a lot of people are starting to look at this Miami Dolphins team and say, you've been blessed with a great amount of talent on both sides of the ball. Now can you move it forward? I know that Miami fans will turn back on the fact that Tua Tagovailoa has had his share of health concerns. And when your biggest health concern is to your quarterback, that's a problem for any coach. And I think anyone that would be sitting in Mike McDaniel's seat right now would struggle and have difficulty with that situation. But there comes a certain time when you have to overcome that. You have to move beyond that. If Tua does have a clean bill of health, which by all indications he does, then you need to find a way to maximize the talent around him. So have the Dolphins done it by bringing in Darren Waller? You can make the argument that Waller's last great season in 2021 55 receptions, 665 receiving yards, two receiving touchdowns in 11 games. That's something right now where you need to worry about what he's going to bring to the table after being away. The talent is clearly there. And if he's maximized in a system like McDaniel, where he can really thrive in the open field and on the perimeter, yeah, absolutely. I think Darren Waller can give you a good amount of firepower, perhaps more than Jonnu Smith did. But at the same time, you need your other pieces around you to be able to upgrade and be able to move forward. Can the Dolphins do that? That's going to be the big question mark. Can that defense finally give that offense the complement, and vice versa? Because I think that largely the offense is underwhelmed when you take a look at the talent they've put out there on the field. Yeah, the long way of answering your question, Derek. Yes, his seat is hot. I'm not sure exactly how hot. If the Dolphins get off to a hot start, you'll see that cool off a little bit. But if they struggle out of the gate, things could get ugly in Miami very quickly.
If they don't make the playoffs, I think Mike McDaniel and the GM are both gone.
Yeah,
That's
I would
just
agree.
my.
But they should be.
I just don't see another way around it. I think we all agree the Bills are most likely to win the division, and then you have the Jets, and I think that ultimately will depend on how well Justin Fields plays. Because I think there's a lot of talent around them. The
Right.
Patriots going to come down to how well does Vrabel's system really get implemented on the field, and can Drake May clean up his turnovers from last year, and can he take that next step? I think those questions are all there. And I'll actually turn Steve's question into what I was going to ask, and then Mike, I'll go to you next. ESPN came out recently and gave the Patriots a 32% chance to make the playoffs. I want to ask you guys what your percentage chance is, and I'll answer after both of you. Mike, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, I mean, the Patriots fan in me would like to say that's a low total. That's a low percentage. I would like to say that maybe they've got a little bit more in the tank than some of the national pundits are giving them credit for. But look, the reality, folks, is this is a team right now that's coming off of two consecutive 4-13 seasons. They have to prove it. They have to show it on the field. They have to take the talent that they've assembled in this offseason and prove that they can win as a cohesive unit on the field. The New England Patriots are not simply just taking chess pieces and moving them around on the board. They essentially cleared the board. They knocked the pieces over and they put up all new chess pieces this year that are going to help to move them forward. So now, when you look at, yeah, Chris, I'm right there with you, buddy. That's it.
Yeah.
Go for it. Guts to the wall, so to speak. I'll keep it clean because it is still a family show, I think, here. But, and yeah, Steve is allowed to ask non-Patriots questions. It's in his contract. Yeah, we definitely go ahead. The Pats fans is overruling me. See, this is already great. I love it. I absolutely love it, folks. For those of you listening to this podcast, not viewing it, I just gave my dispensation to Steve to ask non-Patriots questions, but I have been overruled by the powers that be. So I will acquiesce to the request of my employer on that one. Bottom line, I think the Patriots right now are hovering somewhere under the 50% mark in terms of making playoffs. I'd probably put their chances maybe at about 47, 48%. There's a lot of what ifs on this team. There's a lot of things that could go positively, but we need to see it before we give the blessing for the New England Patriots to pursue the postseason. The offensive line has to come together. We need to see Will Campbell be consistent on a daily basis. They need to figure out the left guard situation. We need to see Stephon Diggs healthy and locked in. If we do, yeah, the Patriots offense is going to be much better this year than it was last year. We need to see the synergy between Ramondre Stevenson and Travion Henderson. On the defensive side of the ball, we have to look at the health of Christian Barmore. Is he capable of taking on the double teams that we know teams are going to throw at them to try to test the skill set of guys like Keon White and Milton Williams? And you've got to see what that secondary can do with Christian Gonzalez. Who else steps up? Is it Carlton Davis? Is it one of the more unsung heroes in that secondary that makes life difficult for opposing quarterbacks? That is what this team needs to prove on the field. If they start proving it correctly, those numbers will go up. But until then, I'm not quite willing to go above 50% on this team, and simply also because of the competition they have around them, and the Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens and battle-tested teams that have been there year after year. And, oh, yeah, you still play in the conference with arguably the team that everybody believes is going to be standing at the end, or at least one of the two standing at the end, and that's the Kansas City Chiefs. So, yeah, I think it's a little low, but at the same time, I think going any higher than 50 right now is a risk, considering what we've got to look at.
Yeah, I'm gonna answer real quick, Steve, and then I'll go to you, and I'll keep it brief. I think it's gonna be closer to 25%. I look at it, and I have a hard time. I have a hard time seeing the Chiefs, Bills, Ravens, and Bengals not, winning, or getting into the playoffs. And then I look at, you know, then you're looking at like 3 spots out of like 12. That's kind of where I got to 25% too. I want to buy in. I just think right now there's still too many variables. I'm optimistic. It doesn't sound like I am, but I am optimistic about where the team's going, but we still need to see it all happen. Can Morgan Moses stay healthy? Can the offensive line come together? I feel good about the running backs. I feel good about Drake May, but he is learning a new offense going into his second year, not to mention opposing defensive coordinators have tape on him that he's going to have to adjust to. And those turnovers were too big of an issue last year. The defense is going to be different, new coaching staff. I just feel like, yes, I'm optimistic, but I have to see it all come together at least a little bit. Right now, I would say under the 32%. So, Steve, I only wanted to answer because Mike and I were a little far apart. I want to see where you're kind of at.
Well, I think ESPN is pretty close, right? Well, they said 32. I would say
Right.
one chance in three.
Yep.
I think that's pretty reasonable because, um, again, you have a new coaching staff, whole new system on both sides of the ball. And, they have on the schedule some winnable games early in the season, but that will depend on how fast the team gels together. If they end up gelling really well early and they stack up a couple of wins, I think, then I'll drink out of my Patriots cup and say, 50%.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm with you on that one. Um, I guess Mike, to you for a question for the panel here.
Well, I think something that Steve said that was interesting, and I think this is a good question for us to kind of segue into, is how well this team is going to gel quickly, how they're going to come out of the gate. Steve, you and I have done podcasts together for a long time. You and Derek have done podcasts together for what seems to be a lifetime. And I say that complimentary, not derivatively. So please, I want to be very clear on that. I respect you guys to the hilt for that. Um, I know we've all talked about at various points the importance of teams coming out and showing their mettle after adversity or after long layoffs or after a bye week, after a tough loss. How does this team come out and play? How do they give it everything? Do they give it everything they've got? We haven't seen that from the New England Patriots in the last couple of years. Now, it's way too early to determine whether or not this Patriots team is at that level. But the one thing that I am encouraged by, and the one thing I continue to see, is this group of Patriots genuinely seems to like to be together. There are a lot of workouts going on right now, all throughout this hiatus period between minicamp and training camp. You're seeing videos pop up all the time about these guys hanging out, gaining camaraderie. You look at, Drake May and Ramondre Stevenson on jet skis, and you see these moments where these guys are coming together and they're really showing that not only are they looking forward to playing together on the field, but they also look forward to being together in the locker room. Camaraderie is not an absolutely essential part of succeeding. We've all covered teams that absolutely hate one another, and they've done a pretty good job of winning. It can be done, but it's so much easier and so much better when the teams get along well to be able to move forward, especially in a new system under a new head coach in a franchise that is anxious to start winning again. That fan base right now, it's palpable. You can feel it. There's a great deal of excitement for the Patriots because it's been, quote unquote, by Patriots fan standards, a long time since they've been to the big game, since they've been to the big dance. I assure you, folks, you get a lot of NFL fans that'll tell you otherwise. But for this team, that's the standard. That's the standard they hold their team to, and they have every right to do it. So at that point, if this team is coming together and they're showing that type of camaraderie now, I think it spells very well for the early goings of this New England Patriots. I think you're going to see a much more cohesive unit here in Foxborough than you've seen in a vast number of years. I think that's where my optimism comes from, and I think that's why I'm a little bit maybe more bullish on their playoff chances, because I really am looking forward to seeing how this team looks right out of the gate once those pads come on in early stages of practice. do we see that camaraderie? If it's there, yeah, this Patriots team can give some team fits, including some of the early easy games, quote unquote, that are on their schedule.
Yeah, and again, looking at that, right? You know, it's a confidence thing too. I mean, you know,
Sure.
when you start losing multiple games in a row, it changes people. All right, you start
Mhm.
seeing bad habits start. We've seen that last year. We heard time and again people were freelancing out there trying to do too much, and then it ends up ultimately being worse for the team.
Mhm.
And to your point, Mike, right around the start of training camp for Derek and I, this will be 15 years we've been doing this podcast.
Mhm.
I don't remember the exact date. We'd have to ask Russ what
I'm
the
sure Russ
exact
would know.
date was, but it was sometime in July, 15 years ago.
I
So,
want to say, yeah, because I want to say that in 2011, I'm almost positive it was 2011. I wrote my first article for Pats fans, and then I moved. I want to say it was 2013, July 2013 was our first training camp together. I want to say somewhere around there. So if I'm not mistaken. But I didn't mean to cut you off, Steve. I was just
no,
yeah, I was just
I
as we're
mean,
going down
yeah,
memory lane.
yeah.
But I
The
mean, I
three
would
of
just
us would be sitting there and,
baking on the baking sheet and the metal
yes,
stands.
and then getting a sunburn on your fourth point of contact. So,
But I would say, guys, that Mike Vrabel made a comment to the players about how 5 weeks ahead of training camp is the most important part of the offseason as far as a training standpoint goes. You see Kyle Williams running through sand up a hill. You see the guys getting together. I know that most every team gets together like this, but it's hard to coordinate, and guys have to buy in and do it. Jalen Polk is the one, I believe, who posted the picture of all the guys getting together, working out. There's a lot of competition in that receiver room, but you still are going over new plays, need to get into football shape, run routes, have that chemistry, have a good chemistry, with the quarterback. And, you have a kind of a diverse group of some veterans, a lot of younger, but there's a lot of younger guys. And so hopefully, I think we're all hoping that they can kind of grow together and in this new offense. And we know that Josh is so good at doing that. I guess as we move on to the next question, I have two, but I'll save the other one after for the next go around. The first one, I guess I'll go with is Terry McLaurin has been very. It's been rumored that he's very unhappy with the Washington Commanders and his contract situation. Obviously, he comes off as a tremendous human being and never heard a bad word said about him. Also, very productive, a solid player. Trey Henderson, the defensive end for the Bengals, also is upset with his contract. Extremely productive, a ton of sacks. I believe he was the sack leader last year in the entire league. And after paying T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, with the Bengals being, I would say, have a reputation for, kind of being shallow with the money and already shelling out so much money, it's hard to see a scenario where they're going to pay him too. My question to you, Steve, is if you had to pick one for the Patriots to trade, would you rather go after Terry McLaurin or Trey?
well, my first thought would be Trey Hendrickson. I mean, I think he's an incredible defensive player. And as you and Mike both know, I always preach the defense. But if they were to get him, um, my only concern would be would that limit the ability for Keon White to play meaningful snaps? And obviously, they would have incredible depth there at the edge. I would love to see that. But Terry McLaurin is somebody, we've talked about on this show many, many times because he's so good. He has been so good for so long that he kind of, sometimes gets overlooked with how good he really is. And, with so many questions still on the offensive side of the ball, especially with the 12 wide receivers that they have, I think right now I probably would lean toward Terry McLaurin.
Mike, what about you?
Yeah, I think Steve makes an interesting point. I mean, at first glance, you look and you say, Trey Hendrickson is a generational type talent. I mean, adding him to this defense with Mike Vrabel, I mean, it's almost a hand in glove fit. But then you start to think about the guys that they have on this defense, and someone like a Keon White who may have a diminished role. Keon is on the upswing. He's right now kind of growing into his own. And I'm not saying he's going to be Trey someday, but there is a very good chance that this kid becomes a very good pass rusher in this system, especially the way Mike Vrabel and Terrell Williams want to play defense. So in that regard, then you start looking at the offense and you start looking at the prowess that this team brings. And one thing that I look for in a young team is prowess where you're going to be able to translate that into big game scenarios, into clutch scenarios, areas where you need to perform at your very best in order to get the best out of your team, whether that's into a playoff race or whether that's into a big late season game where the Patriots are playing for pride, maybe even to play a spoiler to someone. That's still to be determined. But you look up and down this roster, and there's not a whole lot of that outside Stephon Diggs on this receivers core. Terry McLaurin proved it last year that he can do it on a back-to-back basis on a deep run into the playoffs. Washington Commanders have not been a perennial playoff team lately, but they came up very big last year, largely in part because of the performances that Terry put on in the postseason. 7 catches, 89 yards, 1 touchdown in their wild card win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 4 catches, 87 yards, and a touchdown in their win over the Lions. That brought them to the NFC Championship game. He did have a touchdown against the Eagles in the NFC Championship as well. So you're looking at someone that can get the job done on the big stage. To me right now, yeah, I'd lean more toward Terry McLaurin. I think, pairing him with Stephon Diggs and getting guys in the slot that can contribute could be a real eye-opener, and really, I think a huge, huge advantage for someone like Josh McDaniels and, of course, Drake May.
So this is why I feel like it was a good question, because I think you can make a really strong case for both.
Absolutely.
I think that McLaurin, I agree with both of you guys that McLaurin is really hard to turn down. Okay. And plus, I think I would also factor in that I don't think it's a guaranteed that Stephon Diggs is here more than 1 year. And let's be honest, look at his history. He's pretty much worn out his welcome everywhere he's been. So it's not like it's, where you could literally sign McLaurin to a 4-year deal, up, and the thing is you can also front load it because you still have plenty of cap space. So you could front load some of this money. And that way, if you only want to pay him for 3 years, you still have a guy that can be a reliable, good locker room guy. And that fits into what Vrabel wants, because you have a lot of question marks. Even though you have a lot of names, doesn't mean you have a lot of guys that are actually going to be contributors in that receiver room. On the flip side, I could make the case that, okay, yeah, you have 2 beasts of defensive tackles in Barmore and Williams. And Keon White does show promise, and Harold Landry has been incredibly productive. And you have, some guys like Chason and stuff where you can kind of rotate in. But my fear is that what if Harold Landry gets hurt? What if Keon White gets hurt? And then all of a sudden it feels really shallow. And then you could look at, Hendrickson and look at his last 5 seasons. The last 2 seasons alone, he's combined for 35 sacks. So it was going backwards the last 5 years, 17 and a half, 17 and a half, 8, 14, 13 and a half. It's hard to argue with that kind of consistency in production. To me, man, I guess I lean McLaurin, but I'm talking like 51-41. I could make a case for either one of these guys. And by the way, I would do the same thing with Hendrickson that I would do with McLaurin. I would front load these contracts because you have that ability to do it now, because you're not gonna have to pay Drake May big money, assuming he's the guy, for a couple years. So you could go ahead and front load that money. This is why you take advantage of the rookie quarterback contract. This is one of those examples. And I think you could get either one of those guys for a decent value from a draft pick standpoint, and you have the money to pay him. So to me, that's where I'm kind of leaning in. That's why I brought it up.
Does the age factor of either one of these guys concern you guys?
Well, I mean, for me, I mean, I have to look up. Are they both
Yeah,
30 years old?
Hendrickson will turn 31 in December.
Okay.
Terry McLaurin turns 30 in September.
So that's
I
why. So
mean,
that's a good point. That's why McLaurin almost makes more sense, just by a little bit. I mean, not by much, but just a little bit. What do you think?
yeah, because again, I mean, you're looking at it. Um, Edge rushers generally start to lose a step, in their 30s, whereas wide receivers, you know, uh, again, they tend to last a little bit longer because they're not taking the hits that an edge guy can get. But I mean, I wouldn't, be upset with either one of these guys if they were able to swing a deal for him. Everything seems to be pointing toward either Indy or Buffalo for Hendrickson. But when it comes to Terry McLaurin, I mean, it'd be really hard to say no to a deal like that because I think he could give you at least 3, maybe 4 more really good years.
I agree with that. And I also would say this. I think Washington would be out of their freaking minds to go ahead and get rid of McLaurin. You just went to the NFC Championship game. You're going into a year two with a rookie quarterback that had an outstanding year. And now you're going to go ahead and take away his number one target. I just think that would be bananas for them. Plus, they have a billionaire owner. They have deep pockets. The Bengals, on the other hand, like we already talked about, have been always kind of tight with that, with the purse strings. So I don't know. I think if I'm playing devil's advocate, I do think Hendrickson is obviously going to be the one who's probably going to be likely more available, but I do think McLaurin makes a tiny bit more sense. But it's a good discussion. Steve, over to you. What do you got?
Well, again, we talked about Drake May, right? How well will Drake May and Josh McDaniels get on that comfort level that we've seen McDaniels, work his magic with different quarterbacks? And I want to bring this up because, with all the criticism that came down the pike about Mac Jones, in Mac Jones's rookie season, the Patriots were number 6 in the NFL in scoring. They scored 462 points that year. That's a pretty amazing number when you think about last season. They only scored 289.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Josh McDaniels can definitely get this done. I think we all agree that Drake May is physically a much superior player than Mac Jones was. But I mean, that's one question that I have. How quickly will these two guys get on that comfort level where the offense is starting to click?
Mike, for you first.
It's going to take a little time. I mean, Josh McDaniels' offense is not a ready-made cookie cutter offense that you can just plug and play and say, okay, yep, you're going to come in, you're going to learn it, you're going to do it, you're going to execute it. Easy concepts, maybe a couple of wrinkles here and there, but by and large, you'll get it from an early on point. That's not the case. Josh is complex systems. Josh is constantly reinventing what he does, and we're getting more information that there is a lot of reinventing of the wheel going on in Josh McDaniels' playbook right now to kind of adapt for more of the modern game and adapt for the skill set of his new quarterback, Drake May. And in that regard, there always is going to be a little bit of a feeling out period. Derek, I thought you made a very interesting and very good point earlier when you said that Drake May is a second-year quarterback learning a new system. He is indeed learning a new way to play quarterback. The way he was trained under Alex Van Pelt got him ready for the pro game, but it did not prepare him for what he's going to be facing week in and week out in a Josh McDaniels offense. If things are to be believed and Mike Vrabel is going to be here for the long term, and I fully believe he will be, I think it's safe to say that Josh is probably going to be here for the long term as well, right alongside
Yeah.
him as his offensive coordinator. And if that's the case, you need to develop that relationship. It starts slow. There are going to be bumps in the road along the way, But eventually, Steve, to your point, once these guys do come together, I think it's a marriage made in heaven for both of these guys. This is exactly the type of quarterback that Josh can maximize. And in terms of coordination and in terms of the discipline and the adherence to the playbook that all of these quarterbacks need in order to succeed under Josh, Drake, I think, is in the perfect situation for him. So it may take a little longer than Patriots fans like. If these two are still kind of misfiring on some cylinders, it's week 6, week 7, don't panic. But I do believe that sooner rather than later, these guys will click. But it's going to take a little bit of adjustment time beyond just training camp.
And one of the weird X factors too is that if you remember with Mac Jones in his rookie, well, hang on, let me back up. First of all, I do think as long as Mike Vrabel's the head coach, I do think Josh McDaniels will be the offensive coordinator. I don't see him getting another head coaching opportunity. You might hear his name come up in maybe 2 or 3 years if Drake May really blows up for maybe an interview, but I'll believe it when I see it. I have a hard time believing Josh McDaniels is going anywhere in the next 4 or 5 years as long as Mike Vrabel's the head coach. So I want to preface it with that. I think one of the most interesting spin-offs of this conversation too is if you remember the type of success that Mac Jones had his rookie year, overall success with Josh McDaniels, they really had the reins tight on him. They wouldn't even let him throw into the end zone. Now, was that built by design by Bill Belichick, or was that a Josh McDaniels thing? Now, I think McDaniels is smart enough to go ahead and protect him, but will he have the same kind of restraints on Drake May? I would say maybe a tiny bit early as they learn a new system, but I would have a hard time thinking that he's going to let the Ferrari sit in the garage and he takes out the Camry for the entire season. I just don't see that happening. I do think that in the first 2 or 3 games, we'll see some play action. I think we'll see some different things. I think one thing that Josh McDaniels doesn't get enough credit for is adapting on offense. He's adapted styles multiple times. And he's gone through spread personnel to, a running-based team to 2 tight ends to what they did with Randy Moss and everything. And then with what happened with Cam Newton and how they did that. And I think he's going to blend a bunch of stuff together. So because I do think that, yeah, they don't have Randy Moss and Wes Welker, but they do have the option to, I think, for Josh to get creative with the personnel that they have and the skill set that Drake provides. So I think that will be a fascinating watch too. If we're more than probably 3 games into the season and he's still kind of keeping handcuffs on Drake, I would be pretty surprised. I think, again, maybe a slower start just to keep him safe, and I think to eliminate those turnovers. And I think another factor will be how the offensive line holds up. But I think he'll stand around that. I know Josh is a smart guy, despite what some people think. I'm sure that we're going to see some help on the left side for Will Campbell as a rookie left tackle entering the league. So I could see some different things there. But I'm excited for what they're going to use for the kind of the thunder and lightning with what Josh is going to use for the thunder and lightning with Stevenson and Henderson, what the 2 tight ends could bring to the table, the receivers they have at the disposal, and Drake May's athleticism. I think Josh is going to have fun and be creative, and I think he's totally invested. As Scott Zolak said in 98.5 yesterday on Tuesday, that Josh is excited and invested, in this team. And I think that there's a lot of reason for optimism. Sure, the receiver room might be a little shallow, but I still think there are some pieces and parts that you can move around. So that'll be kind of fascinating too. Mike, over to you, bud.
Yeah, I think that it's always interesting and it's always fun to do roundtable discussions at this time of year because everything is still in front of you. And at this point, I know we've seen OTAs and we've seen mini camp, but training camp really starts the season, let's face it. And one of the things that I always like to do at this time of year is think about players that I'm going to be keeping my sharp eye on, players that I'm going to be watching closely, players that are intriguing to me to see how they respond to training camp, how they're able to respond to the competition around them. I'll open this up to you fellas first, and then I'll kind of, wrap it up here. Steve, we'll go to you first. Who are you most looking forward to watching this year in training camp, or at least keeping your eyes on and hearing the reports on? Who are you looking for to potentially have a big camp, or at the very least, just to see what they're made of?
Well, the pessimist in me, which isn't very high, wants to see Kyle Williams because we've heard forever, oh, they can't develop wide receivers, blah, 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 blah. So I want to see how he develops as a rookie right off the bat. But the guy I'm really excited to see, and me, I'm a defensive guy. You would think I was going to say Robert Spillane, which is right there, but I want to see Travion Henderson. I'm really excited to see how McDaniels utilizes him in this offense because I think Henderson has the ability to be a home run hitter. You know, um, especially in the passing game. So, Spillane is right there, Williams is right there, but Henderson is the guy for me. Todd had an interesting question. You think we'll have a tight touchdown catching linebacker this year? I don't know unless Vrabel suits up one more time. I don't think.
Maybe Christian Ellis. He seems athletic enough. I don't know.
One of those guys, Gibbons, I think can do it.
Yeah, maybe.
You know, there are a lot of different guys out there that
maybe Vrabel wants to see a younger version of himself out there.
This is going to be really boring, Mike, but Steve took the two that I was going to say. I want to see if I want your eyes, since your eyes are going to be there, I want to see if the speed in the burst for Williams and Henderson really stand out. Now, I've heard some rumors and some rumblings from some of the guys down there at OTAs and mini camps saying that Henderson's burst is real, but we know there's a difference between track speed and play speed, and I'm curious to see how Kyle Williams kind of jumps off. And look, it's no secret the Patriots have had their own issues with, drafting and developing young receivers over the years, and Kyle Williams has showed some promise, with his college tape. So I'm really curious. But those two guys are two that I would say it's hard for it's really hard for from a spectator standpoint. When you're at training camp, it's really hard to look at line play and really decipher anything. I guess just to mix it up a little bit, I would say I'm kind of curious what the defensive alignments, Mike, are in terms, especially on the back end. Like, who are the starting safeties? Where are they utilizing? Is it Duggar and Peppers or whatever? That I'm kind of curious about the back end of the defense. I have a pretty good idea about the front seven. And I have a feeling, like, I know you won't probably see it, but I have a feeling the fans are going to fall in love with Robert Spillane really fast because I just think he brings that fire and that edge. But I'm really curious about I know it's kind of a cheat, but like the positional group of the defensive backs, I'm curious about the alignments and that when you see with the quote unquote ones more often than not.
Yeah, without question. And I don't think it's a cheat. I think it's actually a good thing to say because it is a good opportunity to be able to scout the secondary. You're right. To a certain extent, when the pads come on, you can start to see the toughness and you start to see the metal of some of these linemen, defensive linemen, offensive linemen for sure. But you really can't get an absolute finger on the pulse until games start, until the preseason games and even into the regular season a little bit to really determine what you're dealing with there. So secondary is a great place to watch. The linebackers can be fun because they can kind of jump a little bit. So I like what you said about Spillane. I do believe he's going to be a fan favorite here in very short order and for good reason. This guy's got a lot of Mike Vrabel in him, not just on the field, but also in the locker room and on the sidelines. He's a guy that's going to be animated. I'm going to flip mine over to the offensive side of the ball, but I'm not going to go in the same direction that you guys went in, although I really can't wait to watch Williams and Henderson try to adapt into this offense. I like roster bubble guys, and I always have. I've always loved that part of the cat and mouse chess game to watch whether or not the guy you feel can be a contributor to this team makes the team or either doesn't or gets pushed to an area where maybe the team feels they can sneak in through waivers and we can get him on the practice squad. The guy I'm really looking forward to watching, and it's going to make our good mutual friend Claire Cooper very happy because we're going to talk a little tight endage here, and that's CJ Dupree. Dupree, to me, is a guy that can really change the complexity of that tight end room. You've got two gifted pass catchers and two savvy veterans in Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper at the top of that positional group. But beyond that, you've got a lot of untested. You've got a lot of uncertainty. Jaheim Bell came in here last year, a lot of talent, very highly typed. didn't seem to be a fit. I don't know what the fit's going to be in a McDaniels offense this year. It's going to be interesting to see what he can do. Guys like Jack Westover is a possibility that he may be able to get a look. You got G. Scott, that could possibly be someone that could catch an eye. But CJ Dupree is coming in from arguably a pro-level ready program in Alabama. This kid is a gifted blocker. He can play as a lead blocker. He played for a number of years in Alabama as the lead blocker, but he can play in line. He's got the strength to be able to make contested catches. If this coaching staff can refine his skills as a pass catcher and kind of finesse them a little bit, especially when it comes to being an underneath target, Patriots could have themselves a diamond in the rough here. So I'm really looking forward to seeing if Dupree is
Great
that
point.
guy that they really can use moving forward and say, we can't risk putting him out there on the waiver wire and try to sneak him in through the practice squad. This is a guy we need to put on the roster. And then at that point, who's the guy that moves off the roster? Obviously, one move has an equal and opposite reaction. You got to take somebody off to put him on. But I think Dupree can make the case, and I wrote about this actually last night for Sports Illustrated, should be dropping at some point today, about the tight ends. I think Dupree is going to give them a lot to think about heading into roster cutdowns at the end of August. I think he's that good, and I think he's that potentially good of a fit in a McDaniel system.
That's a great point there, Mike. I talked to Claire Cooper. I said we're going to have some tight ended stuff if she wanted to join us for a few minutes today. But unfortunately, the times across the pond didn't jive because I was going to pop her in there as a surprise guest. But, something you said, Derek, tweaked my interest. And again, we're talking the offensive line we think is going to be better this year. But, what you said, and I think it's a good point, they're going to try to give, Will Campbell some help. But normally that would be a veteran. And there's still a lot of questions about the left guard position. How is that going to affect Will Campbell this year? Do they go with a guy like Cole Strange, or do they go elsewhere? I think that's a big question, especially when you have the rookie at left tackle.
Yeah, no, I think, and that's kind of, I was kind of going to head towards that direction. So this actually works out well. I really am fascinated by the left guard position, and Mike, that'll be something that you guys can watch. Again, it's not necessarily about how they're blocking, because it's hard to see in Dante's Inferno if it's going to be in a similar spot all the way in the back. But if you have Campbell and you have maybe Bradbury, and then you have Onwenu, and then you have Moses, I have a feeling they're going to be rotating guys at left guard constantly. Is it going to be Cole Strange? Is it going to be Layden Robinson? Is it going to be Sidney So? Is it going to be Jared Wilson? I don't know. And I'm sure I'm forgetting someone, and there's still some veterans out there, and you never know who's going to get cut. So I think that's fascinating, but I have to think that it'd be really hard. As much as I think Jared Wilson's kind of intriguing, I have a hard time believing they're going to put a young player next to another young player on that left side. That seems extremely dangerous. Like Brandon Scherf is still a free agent. He's a veteran guard, but he's traditionally a right guard. Is he willing to go left? Because even if he only gives you a season, at least you have a veteran on the left-hand side that could be next to a younger player. In Will Campbell, even though he had 66 SEC starts, he's still going to be a rookie going into the NFL and making that transition. So I do think that that's an interesting aspect of the whole thing, Steve. So has some experience there, and Strange has some experience, but I don't know. I mean, Strange hasn't been horrible. I think his draft stock, or his draft selections, where he was picked, didn't do him any favors. I don't think he's been horrible. I don't think he's been good. I think he's been average. But he does have probably the most experience to kind of fill those shoes. Maybe they look at it and say, well, he has the most experience, and that will go ahead and help Will Campbell out having that experience. at the same time, I would also argue myself and say that Mike Vrabel traditionally likes bigger offensive linemen. So I don't know. I'm not sure. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a big time question, and I think that's worth exploring. And a lot of it is going to be determined by McDaniel's preference, and we've talked about that here before. Is a guy like City So better suited for the type of lineman that Josh McDaniels typically likes to employ? City had a very good year under Josh when he was here the last time. So is that going to be the opportunity for him to move forward, or is someone like Cole Strange, who is maybe a little bit more compact but more mobile, able to find their niche in this offensive line? A lot of it's going to be determined by Vrabel's preference too. I think that's an excellent point, Derek. I mean, let's not forget he's the head coach. He's ultimately the guy that signs off on all this, so he's going to have to be comfortable as well. And bottom line, and I think we all agree on this, gentlemen, and we've all said this: who's doing the best job of providing protection for Drake May in that offense? Who's clearing the lanes for Stevenson and Henderson to be able to utilize their prowess in the running game? But who's making Drake protected? That's going to be the biggest question. Whoever does that to the best of their ability is the one that's going to win the job.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, I have to wrap up here soon. So does anyone else want to bring something else to the table before we, head out?
Well, again, we talked about different scenarios and things we'd like to see. I just for the benefit of our listeners who haven't been to training camp, we all talk about how difficult it is to see the offensive linemen and defensive linemen, because where the media sits is at the farthest point from that. Now, some of the fans who come in and they can sit at the far end of the bleachers when you enter the training, camp field or the practice field, you might get a better glimpse of that. But, where we have traditionally sat, sometimes it's really hard to see that. The one-on-one battles, you have all these moving parts in front of you. So that's one thing, we would like to, when the fan base gets let in at training camp, if you guys see anything at that far end that you'd like to share, please let us know, because that is something I think that is going to be of extreme interest this year.
Yeah, and I would also say my
Great
favorite
point.
part of training camp, I mean, there's a lot of fun things to see, but my favorite part is when you can hear some of the coaching and some of the instruction. Like, when you enter training camp, the stands are on the right side for the fans. The media's on the left side with the backs to the stadium, right? So the far end is where we're talking about the offensive linemen. But usually, you can see some special team stuff over on the left side from, the media perspective. You can see some stuff on the left side. And then they usually do goal line up and down both sides of the field. But I love hearing the instruction and the coaching, and then also you hear some other stuff that's with some colorful language from the players, which I also really enjoy. I know Miguel wouldn't, but I really do. Miguel, if you could get a tip jar for a swear jar for that field, you'd be the biggest donor for your foundation. Just real quick, Todd mentioned do they still have access to Scar? I don't really know. I know he's popped in and out. I know he's popped in and out. I know he has a relationship with Vrabel, but I don't know if he's planning on coming.
Yeah, I would talk. They have a great offensive line coach in Doug Marrone. So
absolutely, yeah.
I think he's going to be just fine. Of the guys that are still in the NFL, to me he'd be one of the top choices for an offensive line coach, and he has head coaching experience. So, he can work well with Josh McDaniels. I think those two will work very well together. But no, it's just it's training camp to me was so much fun.
Absolutely.
You would sit there, you get to see the players. Like Mike said, even the undrafted guys who were on the roster bubble. We watched Malcolm Butler blossom right in front of our eyes.
Mm-hmm.
It's so much fun. But my favorite memory will always be, when Brandon Browner
split the hit heard around the world.
Oh my God!
Steve and I
because
looked
I
at each other
remember
like,
that,
"Oh my
and
god, he just
he
killed
was
a guy."
cussing up a storm after he threw. That was, I mean, that was one of those, rare moments. But
Well, I just want to thank everyone who's listened to Patriots No Huddle. Please do
Mhm.
subscribe to us on our Apple Podcasts, Spotify channel, and our Pats Fans YouTube channel. Like, share, leave us a review. Keep us high in the podcast rankings so other Patriots fans can find us. Mike, do you have another question? And if not, you can just take us out after that.
No, I think what we've kind of developed into everything that we really wanted to develop into today. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining me. Steve, good tidbit there. Definitely sad Claire couldn't join us today, but who knows? She will be able to join us, I'm sure, at some point to lend her wisdom and counsel with tight endage. Most of all, folks, we want to thank all of you for taking time out of your day to make Patriots No Huddle a part of your Patriots coverage. We're just getting started. We're just scratching the surface when it comes to our Patriots coverage here. So make sure to like, subscribe, and follow Patriots No Huddle wherever you get your podcasts to make sure that you're getting the latest episode as soon as it's available, including subscribing to the Pats Fans channel on YouTube. On behalf of my Patriots Paisan, Steve Balestrieri, my good friend Derek Havens, I'm Mike Debate, reminding all of you to stay safe, to stay well, to be the change that you wish to see in the world. Have a great day, everyone, a great week. We'll see you back here next time on Patriots No Huddle.